Today I'm going to show you how I'm going to turn this hybrid willow tree behind me into multiple free trees. So stick with me, I'll show you what I'm up to. Alright, the first step was ripping that tree tube off. You can see my hybrid willow. This one's about 4 years old. Pretty good, healthy looking tree. So now it's time to cut it down. Alright, I got my tree cut. Look at that nice healthy green growth on it. They say the hybrid willow is one of the fastest growing trees in North America. They claim 40 feet in 4 years in ideal conditions. This was an upland spot, so willows obviously like moisture, so I probably got maybe 15 feet of growth, 10 to 15, well, probably 12 to 13 feet of growth in 4 years. So still pretty good because it was 1 foot tall when I planted it, but definitely a nice tree. If you put it in a spot that has wet feet, I think you could get really fast growth out of it in those good conditions. Alright, so you can see there's my hybrid willow stump. I'm actually going to take my tree tube and put it back on that because it should have a good enough root system by this 4th year that it'll sprout back, so I can use it for a seed tree in the future. Alright, got my seed tree tubed again. I'm going to take this guy and get it cut up and ready for planting. Alright, I got my cuttings done. Looks like I got about 9 of them. This is all nice, healthy looking, green growth. I like that like 2-year-old growth the most when I'm doing cuttings, so something that looks like that. But this all looks good and healthy, so I should be able to get a majority of it to root. So now I'm going to go find a spot to plant them. And also when I'm doing cuttings, normally I like to do 2-foot cuttings, but I only had 1 tree to work with, so I'm going to try stretch it a little bit. So these are probably 18-ish inches, some of them are a little closer to 1 foot. But as long as I have a few of the nodes sticking up out of the ground, I should be able to get them to root. Alright, so here's a big thing to remember if you want to have a high success rate as far as rooting these cuttings. So once you get to the spot you want to plant, right before you plant, what you want to do is you want to take your knife and you want to scrape along one side of your cutting. So by scraping along one side of your cutting, you're going to help encourage rooting, and you're doing the scraping on the part that you're actually going to put in the ground, not the part that's going to stick above ground. Alright, so once you've scraped along one side of the cutting, you simply take your cutting and stick it in the ground. And that's all there is to it. You can see I have it with the nodes facing up, which you want to make sure you do, otherwise it's going to not grow the right direction. But that's it. I got several good nodes here that are going to be the spots that the tree will likely start to sprout from. So when I'm planting these cuttings, I like to bring a little homemade T-bar like this just to help me get that hole started. Otherwise you might end up damaging the cutting when you're pushing it into the hole, breaking it off or something like that. So this is a nice way just to get the cutting started. Alright, I got my stake in there. There's my cutting, prepped and ready to put a tube on it. If you got any kind of deer density, you want to tube these things because the deer will kill them. I've made that mistake before, thinking I can play the numbers game, put a bunch of these in the ground and a few will get past the deer, but the deer do a great job of finding them. So in this area I'm putting these hybrid willows in. I just happened to find a red osier dogwood cutting that I planted probably a couple years ago. Now these are absolute deer candy too, so I probably will throw a tube on this today. Otherwise I'm sure the deer will find it and kill it. But you can see there's my original cutting. Base looks nice and healthy. There's my shrub that's starting to come. Red osier dogwood, willow, hybrid poplar, all of them root really, really well from cuttings. One quick tip when you're tubing trees, make sure there's no space between the tube and the ground. I almost kind of dug it in a little bit because what happens if you leave a gap there, it acts like a wind tunnel in those hot summer days. And the air just rushes up the tube and it'll dry out your tree. So you want to kind of dig it in a little bit so that the tree doesn't fry in the summer. Well, I was just about to wrap up my tree planting, and check that out. Yeah, let's see if I can. There we go. Now you can see it. That's a nice heavy little shed. Awesome. I have not found much for sheds this year, so that's exciting to actually find one. So these are all the stems that are left over. I'm actually taking them, as you can see, that one, and sticking them in the ground too. Some of them will probably take and root, but I have them here, might as well use them, and we'll see what happens with them. Probably am not going to tube these ones just because it's a little bit lower odds proposition that they're actually going to take. Well, some of those small stems I stuck in actually had a pretty good backbone to them, so I think maybe I will get a handful of those to go. If I find them this summer, I'll throw a tube on them. So that's what the end product looks like, the ones that I threw a tube on. I purposely put them in this ravine here because there'll be more moisture, so I'm hoping I can get a little bit faster growth than that initial hybrid willow that I planted. The more I hang out in this spot, the more I find some of these old cuttings that I threw in. So this guy right here sure has been getting browsed by the deer. That's a little peach leaf willow. You can see the initial shoots coming right out of the base there, and then there's a secondary one right there. So if I threw a tube on that, it would actually probably have a chance. But yeah, there's a few of them in here. Here's another small old one right there. You can see the stem coming off, again coming out of the base down in there. So willow are really good species to plant via cuttings. It works as long as you get them past the deer. Alright, that's it for today. Should share the reason quick why I'm planting the hybrid willows. In this circumstance, they're acting as a bit of a screen. That's probably the best application for hybrid willow. I've used them before. If I have a client that has an issue with maybe a neighbor that's shooting across the property line, they're a good option because they grow fast. I'd like to eventually have a secondary option where it's possible to put some spruce behind the willow, but that's not always possible. So the willows act like a nice quick screen. But yeah, easy to plant, free trees. You can see it's pouring rain today, so they're going to get moisture right away. But as always, I'll make sure to do a follow-up here eventually and show how these free trees are doing. All right, y'all take care. God bless.